slow ahead. I can go slow ahead. Come on down and chum some of this shit. You're gonna need a bigger boat.
The week of July 4th this year, I was able to catch a showing of Jaws at a local megaplex. I completely forgot that this was a perfect 4th of July film. Jaws is a film that I essentially grew up on. When I was really young, I had an intense fascination with sharks, and I always was captivated by that poster, which is probably still the most iconic film poster of all time, as well as one of the most famous images on the planet, just in general. And ever since I was finally allowed to watch it when I was around 9 or 10, it became one I frequently rewatched and revisited. It was, and still is, one of my favorite movies. But being really young, what I liked about it was, of course, this stuff.
You son of a...
And more often or not, I became somewhat uninterested whenever the film took a more human, introspective approach, or especially that third act on the boat, where the pace slows down considerably, and I couldn't understand anything that guy was saying and just wanted to fast forward to when the shark was back on screen. However, revisiting Jaws after a real long time, I was completely enamored by it, almost like I was watching it all over again for the first time. From rediscovering the amount of thematic depth presented in the film, still being blown away by the effects, its perfect screenplay, Spielberg's timeless direction, the massive scale of some of these sequences, it affected me enough to want to make a video on already one of the most critically acclaimed films of all time, and explain just why I think 48 years later, Jaws is still just as impressive, if not even more so, and why I believe it still remains the best the monster movie genre has to offer. So how does Jaws, a simple 70s thriller film about a killer shark terrorizing a small island community, was able to leave such a massive cultural impact, change Hollywood forever upon being considered the first blockbuster, and still remain the pinnacle of the monster movie subgenre, as it stands enormously above both its influences and contemporaries? Let's get into it. Right off the bat, you know you're in for some classic shit. The opening scene of Jaws is one of the greatest openings to any film. It ingeniously grabs your attention and lets you know what this film's all about. And it effectively plays into two very human fears, the fear of the unknown and the fear of isolation. I feel like everyone can relate to how terrifying the ocean is. It covers a majority of the surface of the planet. It's so vast and infinite and endless. Only 5% of the entire ocean has been explored by man, so we truly have no idea what unearthly, Lovecraftian monstrosities could be lurking in the depths. And while we know what the monster is in Jaws, it's, just a shark. Everyone knows what that is. The opening scene casts everything in such a dark and mysterious aura. This opening is by far the most unnerving depiction of a shark attack in the film because of how mysterious everything is presented. There's this slow, elongated build-up that crescendos in this poor woman getting thrown around helplessly as she screams out for help but nobody's around to hear. It's loud, it's uncomfortable to watch. John Williams' score is going crazy until she unceremoniously gets dragged down to the depths, and we hold on this quiet, unnaturally peaceful shot of the sea, contrasting what we just saw moments ago, but calling back to how quiet things were before the attack, like a sort of bookend. Also reminding me a lot of the final line from Moby Dick, which this film shares many ideas with and lifts many plot elements from. There's a lot of discussion on whether Jaws should be considered a horror movie or not. While the film has many horror elements, at no point does it ever really try to be a straight-up horror film, the same way, say, the Texas Chainsaw Massacre or The Exorcist were a year prior to Jaws' release. But scenes like these scattered throughout the film are still genuinely effective and unnerving, not to mention it has probably one of the craziest jump scares in cinematic history. While the opening is the most terrifying scene as a whole, each of these other shark attack scenes are still masterfully put together. Famously, the production of Jaws was a complete and utter disaster, facing constant delays, infighting among the cast and crew, Spielberg being locked into a constant conflict against nature and the ocean while shooting the last act of the film, and most famously, the fact that the animatronic shark never fucking worked. The shark constantly malfunctioned, was too heavy to remain buoyant in the water, and as soon as they got it working in a pool at Universal Studios, the moment they put it in salt water, it completely fried the machine's circuits, so the constant delays they had to make in order to get the shark working forced Spielberg and crew to get real creative when filming most of these shark scenes without a shark.
Absolutely everything was falling apart. The first time we tested the shark, it sunk. I knew that it's going to take 3 or 4 weeks to rebuild the shark. And so we'd have to make up something else that didn't exactly show the shark, but gave the sense the shark was near. The barrels were a godsend, because I didn't need to show the shark as long as those barrels were around. What you don't see is generally scarier than what you do see. And the script was filled with shark here, shark there, shark everywhere. The movie doesn't have very much shark in it.
In the entirety of Jaws, which has a 124-minute runtime, the shark is fully on screen for a grand total of 4 minutes. You don't even get a glimpse of it until about 30 to 40 minutes in, and then again an hour in. At the beginning of the third act you get a glimpse of its face, but you don't get full body shots until like the last 20 minutes. To keep you feeling the creature's presence throughout the film, Spielberg employs all the tricks in the book. There's lots of point of view shots that are used very effectively. Of course, you get the fin cutting through the water, brief glimpses of it covered by something in front of it. There's a few moments where something gets hooked onto the shark and it pulls it along the water, showing you where it's swimming, and keeping it submerged and only highlighting specific features like its eyes and mouth. This shot especially is just chilling. It's a prime example of how sometimes less is more. Last year's Nope, directed by Jordan Peele, which was directly inspired and influenced by Jaws, was one of my favorite films of the last year, and just one of my new favorite movies in general. But even I have to admit that the crazy level of fear factor created by Jean Jacket the alien is definitely lost a little in the final act, where it's just explicitly shown throughout the climax, in contrast to how kept in secret it was in the early parts of the film. And I feel like Jaws really doesn't have this problem, despite having the same typical monster movie formula of keeping the monster kept in shadows or covered up until finally revealing it in full during the last act, because it's still only shown briefly after 2 whole hours of build-up. Of course, one of the main aspects to what make these shark scenes so incredible is John Williams' masterful score. Everyone knows the Jaws theme, even people who haven't seen it.
Dun 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 bum 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 bum.
Come on, a little more,
It's definitely one of the most famous pieces of music ever composed, and it amplifies these scenes to such an extraordinary degree. The slow, brooding start, then as things get moving in, quickly hastens along and it gets faster and sharper until the crescendo. A big eruption of violence and chaos. Just look at this scene with the score removed. It doesn't invoke any of the same emotions at all, but none of these scenes, while great on their own, would have a larger overarching effect or importance behind them if you didn't care about the importance of them in the context of the story and the effect they leave on the characters. Having great, well-written, and likable characters is something a lot of monster movies neglect to do, and instead opt to have generic cardboard cutout characters that just serve to move the plot along and get to the next scene of giant monster spectacle. I hate it when people talking about these newer American Godzilla movies say that the human should just be cut out entirely and the movie should just be all kaiju action, because of how intrusive they are to the scenes people want to see. But the problem isn't that human characters are inherently bad or intrusive to the action, it's because they're terribly written, boring, entirely unmemorable, and annoying. So as soon as the film cuts to them, you're craving for the film to cut away from them as soon as possible. You need human characters to ground the big monster scenes and give them a sense of weight and impact. That's what Jaws delivers tenfold. Chief of Amity Police, Martin Brody, is an exceptional and iconic lead protagonist. He's recently moved him and his family from the rough and tumble New York City to the quiet, peaceful small town island community that gets rocked by these reports of shark attacks.
Yeah.
Brody is the perfect storm of what a movie like this needs. He isn't a huge Hollywood Jason Statham type ex-mercenary or special forces guy, muscle man riding a jet ski with a samurai sword fighting the shark. Brody's basically an average, everyday family guy, forced into a situation much bigger than himself. He's a New York copper, not used to Amity's way of life, so when these shark attack reports come out and he immediately rushes to close the beaches, he's met with immediate resistance from the citizens, despite him genuinely wanting what's best for them. Until so much has gone wrong, and he finally takes things into his own hands and joins Quint and Hooper on their quest to kill the shark. Hooper is also a great character. He's a very independently wealthy marine biologist who gets called to the island to give an expert's opinion on how to handle the shark, but ultimately becomes obsessed with the creature and joins Quint and Brody on board the Orca so that he can find and study it. Quint, I believe, is the most fascinating character in the film. He's first introduced in this awesome moment.
You all know me. Know how I earn a living. I'll catch this bird for you, but it ain't gonna be easy. It's bad fish. Not like going down the pond chasing bluegills or tommy carps. This shark, swallow you whole. Shaking, tenderizing, down you go.
As a mysterious fisherman who looks leaps and bounds more grizzled and professional than any other fisherman we've seen on the island. Brody doesn't know him, but everyone else on the island seems to know him. Later, when they decide to hire him, he is established to be an extremely prolific shark hunter who becomes completely obsessed with killing the shark, taking it to the fullest extremes and getting his boat destroyed in the process, inadvertently leading to him getting himself killed by the shark. In the scene before his death, Quint explains in one of the finest written and performed monologues in film history that he was a sailor on board the USS Indianapolis during World War II, a massive aircraft carrier that was sank by a Japanese submarine. 800 sailors jumped ship and were forced to stay afloat by their own means for 4 days before they were rescued. And during that time, nearly 500 sailors died from either dehydration, injuries suffered during the sinking, and most prominently, shark attacks. Quint was one of these sailors who spent days watching each and every one around him get ripped apart by sharks, and having suffered this uber-traumatic event, he's manifested it into essentially an intense hatred for sharks, and has dedicated his life to hunting and killing as many as he can, which is why when he's tasked with killing this massive great white that's been going around eating the people of Amity, the cracks in his calm and collected persona begin to show, and madness and obsession take over, spelling his downfall. Quint is clearly inspired by Captain Ahab from Moby Dick, a character who, after losing his leg and former crew to the great white whale Moby Dick, has dedicated his life to hunting the creature down, eventually leading to, once again, the death of everyone around him and his own life being taken by the whale. A whale, which at the end of the day has no personal vendettas or volition towards Ahab at all. It's just a big dumb animal doing big dumb animal things, just like the shark from Jaws. The shark is given some mild characterization, but for the most part it's just doing what carnivorous animals do, which is swim around and eat things when it gets hungry.
Mr. Vaughn, what we are dealing with here is a perfect engine, an eating machine. It's really a miracle of evolution. All this machine does is swim and eat and make little sharks, and that's all.
It just happened to eat a few humans, and the people of Amity took it personally. With Ridley Scott's Alien or the Arnold Schwarzenegger Predator, the monsters in these films are hyper-intelligent killing machines that are directly malicious towards the characters and choose to hunt them down for game or for sport or fun. But with a big dumb shark, you don't get that same feeling at all, which adds to the tragedy factor of Quint's character, who lives and dies because of something so futile, like taking a personal vendetta against a shark. Basically what I'm saying is that Jaws is the best Moby Dick adaptation we've ever had. A lot of people say that this movie gets boring in the third act, and while younger me also thought that, and it definitely isn't as directly entertaining as all the Amity Island bits, I still think the quieter, slower, and more introspective direction it goes on board the Orca is just as good. I also love the underlying political commentary involving everything with the iconic mayor antagonist, someone who's so willingly, blissfully ignorant of what Brody and Hooper warn him of. He chases confirmation bias from his colleagues and refuses to close the beaches right before the big July 4th tourist rush, which almost literally comes back to bite him in the ass when the shark comes back and ruins Amity's image among tourists. The mayor's story is something that's only gotten more and more politically relevant with age. The human storylines and plot points are given just as much emphasis as the shark scenes. Steven Spielberg knows that the core heart of this film lies not with crazy violence or scary shark action, but with the people it surrounds and affects, and the ramifications a killer shark has on an island community, the obsession it creates from the people who want to kill the shark, the innocent people who have to deal with the easily preventable loss of someone they were close to, the blind, angry mob mentality it creates, with everyone riled up over a cause they don't really understand, the out-of-touch politicians who just want to ignore and cover everything up so they can continue to make money instead of dealing with the problem, and poor old Brody who just gets caught up in everything. When I think back on Jaws, what pops into my head isn't necessarily stuff like this.
Smile, you son of a...
It's scenes like Hooper and Quint comparing their scars, Quint's monologue, Brody's wife looking at the shark attack picture and then telling the kids to get out of the boat, and my favorite scene, and one of my favorite scenes from any movie ever, this little moment where Brody, feeling the guilt of keeping the beach open at behest of the mayor, leading to the death of a kid, is sitting with his youngest son at the dinner table. The kid, entirely unaware of his father's grief, quietly mimics his movements, while Brody's wife watches. It's such a beautiful, humanist scene of a father and son bonding that in any other movie of this type would feel completely out of place, but not for Jaws, because Spielberg knows that to make this movie work, moments like these should be treated with just as much care and with the same level of importance as any of the big shark set pieces.
Give us a kiss.
Why?
Because I need it.
And this is why Jaws still remains the best monster movie out there. Thanks for watching.